Welcome to the G5 Hive in our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be heading over to the Mid-American Conference for some MACtion and taking a look at the Ohio Bobcats, who finished 11-3 last season. They won the MAC championship for the first time since 1968 and capped off their season with a win in the Cure Bowl. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their spring game on April 19th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is a student at Ohio University. He is a sports staff writer for the Post. He is the editor of sports section of the Post. He covers Ohio football. He is Charlie Fadel. Charlie can be found at Charlie Fadel on X. Welcome to the show, Charlie.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys having me. Super pumped to be on here. I've never done a podcast before, so excited to get started.
It's going to be great. We're going to be talking about football. We're going to be talking MACtion. But first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what got you interested into sports media, and how long you've been covering Ohio Bobcats football?
Yeah, totally. So I'm from Cleveland. I'm a big Cleveland sports fan, huge Cleveland sports fan. You know, my whole family really is. And I've really just been obsessed with sports since I can ever remember. And once I found out that was something I wanted to pursue as a career, talking and writing about sports for a living, I knew I had to come to OU. It's a great school for it. It's a great program, and the opportunities I've had at the Post have been amazing. So, that's definitely one of the main reasons why I came here. And since then it's been great. This is just my sophomore year. We're here finals week now in Athens at OU, so we're finishing up my second year of college. And this year I got the chance to work on the football team, beat right for the football team, and that was really fun. Obviously, it was a great year. Super excited, and it was just a great time. Yeah.
Well, let's move to some Bobcats football. The Bobcats have hired Brian Smith as their new head coach. Smith has been with the program since 2022, and he served in many roles such as passing games coordinator, running backs coach, assistant head coach, and last season he was the offensive coordinator. What can you tell us about Coach Smith and what he brings to the table for the Bobcats?
Yeah, Brian is really a guy that a lot of the dudes love. He has a really in-depth background. He's a West Coast guy. He played football at Hawaii. He was an lineman there before. I believe he got a couple shots at the pros, but ultimately didn't last long in the NFL, and he went over into the coaching ranks, especially, like I said, in the West Coast scene. He coached for Oregon State, Hawaii, his alma mater, and he really worked most prevalently under Nick Rolovich at Washington State, where he was eventually their offensive coordinator before coming over here. He started as a running backs coach and did work with CA, who obviously is now back in as a Bobcat. And he's just a guy that really took over the offense last year. Last year was his first year as the OC for OU. And his offense, I think, really, really developed throughout the season. If you go back week 1 against Syracuse, we didn't really know what the identity was of the team. OU didn't really know what their identity was. And they really figured that out throughout the year. In that Syracuse game, they would get down to the goal line a couple times. And, they just didn't really know how to punch it in. They didn't really find what was the real meat and potatoes of that offense, which was Parker Navarro and Anthony Tyus running the ball. So once he found that, it really just took off from there. Once that offense was really catered to Parker and his strengths, it was pretty much unstoppable. It was the number one offense in the MAC, and then obviously carried into the MAC championship game where they won that, and carried into the bowl game where they won that against Jacksonville State. But as far as he goes as a head coach, obviously Tim Albin left this year, went to Charlotte, and I think it was pretty obvious that he was going to be the hire. I think everyone knew sort of that it was going to be an internal hire with just all the success and the culture that has been instilled with all the way going back to Coach Solich before even Albin took over. So with the way the offense performed that year, it seemed like it was going to be Brian. He was named the interim coach even before he was named the full-time head coach. which really just, was a big vote of confidence, I would say, from athletic director Julie Cromer, as well as just some of the guys on the team. You could tell that they rallied around him, especially during the bowl game, which was his first game as the official head coach. So, yeah, I think he brings a lot of just leadership experience. And again, he brings a proven offensive style to the table, especially with the returning quarterback this year. And the coach quarterback combo in football is one of the most important, I believe. And that will be returning this year. So it should be another up year for him and just the offense in general. So I'm excited to watch it.
Well, as it often happens when you get a new head coach, it means new assistants and new coordinators.
Yeah.
Ohio's no different in that regard. And maybe this is speaking to that culture thing that you were just speaking about. And their OC is kind of a unique hire in the sense of the Bobcats have hired Scott Ishfording, or Coach Izzy, to be their OC.
Yep.
And this is his second stint with the team. He was the OC from 2021 to 2023 before Brian Smith took over as the OC last season.
Yeah.
Describe the top type of offense that we're going to see. Is this going to be Coach Izzy's offense? Is it going to be Coach Smith's offense? What are you expecting, or what have you been hearing?
I really expect it to be more of Coach Smith's offense. Izzy is a guy that's been with the program for a really long time. He obviously, like you said, was the OC for a couple of years with Curtis, and he took him. Curtis won MAC Player of the Year, Curtis Rourke, for those that don't know, 5-year Bobcat. But yeah, Izzy, he's a great guy, and his offense just sort of, I think in 2023, which was the year that we were really heavily favored to win the MAC. That was Curtis's last year here. We had CA last year before he transferred, and ultimately we just couldn't get it done. The offense ran more out of the pistol. It was a little stagnant. It just wasn't. I don't think it was what everyone was expecting, where you had this returning MAC Player of the Year to come in and sort of light the earth on fire. And so obviously Albin before last year pivoted and hired Brian as the head coach, or as the offensive coordinator, excuse me. And like I said, the offense just took off. They embraced a new identity under a new quarterback who had a new identity, which was just running the ball. And when they had a guy like Anthony Tyus back there, who really was just a premier back, not only in the MAC, but in all of Group of Five and all of college football, both those guys racked up so many touchdowns. That's what got Coach Smith hired as the head coach. So I really do think it'll be more of Brian's offense again this year. Izzy will definitely bring some ideas. Again, he was quarterback's coach last year, so he worked really closely with Parker. And throughout the year, like I mentioned, Parker's running got better, but his throwing also definitely got better. Early in the year, it was pretty shaky. But as it went on, he really developed connections with guys like obviously Coleman Owen, who was, as far as wide receivers go, was the number one behind Harold Fannin, who was a tight end. But as well as Chase Hendricks, who will be returning this year. But again, I think it'll be a lot of Brian's ideas, a lot of his concepts and his vision for how the offense will run, which should be more the same as last year, considering especially how successful they were.
Well, let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback.
Yeah.
Last year is how would Ohio fare after losing the Maple Missile and Curtis Rourke to Indiana, and the answer was they didn't miss a beat. Parker Navarro had an outstanding year for the Bobcats in 2024, and kind of like you've alluded to, I watched a lot of MAC and Bobcat games, and like the best two games Parker played all year were the MAC championship game and that bowl game. And the development from early in the season towards the end, it was pretty incredible. And so, has that continued into the spring? Did he look great again this spring? And do you think it's going to continue over to 2025?
So for the spring this year, he was actually injured. He did not play the spring game. He wasn't really available at all during the spring. It appeared to me that he had surgery on a shoulder injury that sort of occurred during the year, not anything new. I'm not totally 100% sure on that, but he was in a sling for a majority of the spring. By the spring game, though, he was out of it. He was still throwing by the spring game, just not in pads, not going live. But like you said, the development of him last year was honestly staggering to see as it played out the course of the year. going from Syracuse, which was a good game, I think it really brought a lot of hopes up for the team that was not really expected to do that well after all the transfer portal exodus that they had in the offseason. But yeah, again, still, they didn't really know that identity. And the team and the offense developed as Parker did. His third game of the year against Morgan State, he was benched at halftime after throwing 3 picks against an FCS team. He didn't play. He was hurt the next game in Kentucky. But after that, once they started MAC play, he was lights out. And then, like you said, it really carried over, especially into the MAC championship game. He was almost flawless. That was easily the best game I've seen him play. Watching that game up in the booth it was incredible. I mean, obviously as a reporter, I try to be unbiased, but I had to felt a little something there. But truly, he really came along as the season progressed. And I think that it'll be, again, obviously he's coming back. That's not going to leave, especially with Coach Smith still there. But yeah, he was not available during the spring, unfortunately. His game truly is really just it's almost run first, I would say. He does so much damage out of the backfield and out of the read option, especially last year with a weapon like Anthony Tyus. It was just you had to pick your poison if you were a defense. And when they got around the goal line, it was pretty much that every single time. You weren't really going to see a different play besides a read option with Parker and Tyus called. And again, it worked out super well. The offense was great. And as far as the spring goes, though, as far as the quarterback room, it looks like Nick Palos is going to be the backup. He was the backup last year. He would come in either when, if there was a blowout and the subs would get in, he was the next guy that would come in. He looked okay during the spring. He did throw a touchdown in the spring practice to Alfred Jordan, who's a transfer receiver. And then behind him, it was going to be Jacob Winters as the third stringer. He's a sort of a local guy from Southern Ohio. He's from Jackson, Ohio. It's about 45 minutes west of Athens, still Southern. And then behind him, it's Matthew Pappas. And incoming this fall is going to be Hype Grand, which we have not gotten to see, but he's a pretty highly touted recruit that Coach Smith was able to get here on campus. He's a guy from Pasadena who, again, brings a lot of dual threat type of game, type of talent and ability to him. So that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. And again, especially for next year, because Parker will be gone. I assume Nick Powell will be gone as well. So there will be some type of battle looking ahead to next year. But as of this year, the room is super solidified. It's going to be Parker, obviously, as the starter with Palos and Winters backing him up. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he keeps his progression going, at least Navarro, into next season.
You talked about the development, and like the passing was the thing. I remember messaging Luke while I was watching that championship game. I'm like, oh my God, like some of these throws he was making, like I had never seen him make those throws, in previous games. And then he kind of outdoes himself again in that bowl game. And
right.
I think are folks really excited about Parker coming back in 2025? And it seems like he could possibly be, the MAC Conference Player of the Year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everyone's super hyped. Obviously, he almost became a little bit of a national name after game day with Timothy Chalamet name dropping him. That was a really big deal for a school here that doesn't get much national coverage at all. So that was awesome. But yeah, people are definitely excited. There was a bit of uncertainty with the eligibility nowadays with COVID and with all these red shirts. It's really tough to try to decipher if a guy has another year or not. But he did have another year, thankfully for Ohio. And when he announced that he was coming back, I was super excited. I'm sure all the higher ups here in Athens were super excited as well. And there's a ton of hype around him. He finished the year as MAC's second team quarterback behind Brett Gabbert. And then obviously Harold Fannin ended up winning Offensive Player of the Year. But there's total and deserved hype for him to be the MAC Player of the Year next year. I wouldn't be shocked if he's the preseason Player of the Year. Obviously, DeQuan Finn coming back, who himself is a former Player of the Year. on Toledo, who is now coming back from Miami. He'll get a ton of hype as well, and that is also deserved. Obviously, he has the resume. But Parker, I truly do think will have a lot of that hype, and it's deserved. I'm excited to see what the preseason polls end up looking like, the coaches poll, as well as just around the media as well. And I would expect his name to be at the top of that list. And yeah, like you said, the passing really, really took off. It was that Coleman Owen touchdown throw. I think that really.
Like in the corner of the end zone. I remember
He was on the move. Yeah,
I was like, oh my god,
that was the best throw I've ever seen him make. And I think I tweeted that like exactly when I was there live watching it. And again, it was just super cool to see him be able to transform into that type of guy. So yeah, after performances like that in the championship game and in the bowl game, he will definitely be at the top of some of those lists for Player of the Year next year.
Let's head over to the running game. And heading into 2024, we thought this team would lean heavily on Ricky Hunt Jr. because Seya Bangura transferred to Minnesota, and he had just had that great bowl game 2 seasons ago. However, Anthony Tyus III practically did it all for the Bobcats last season. Tyus has now graduated, and Hunt has transferred to Tulsa. Now he's back into the portal. But a familiar face joins the Bobcats from the portal, and that's Seya Bangura. How did that room shape up in the spring?
Yeah, Seya, he really is going to be the lead back again, I think, next year. Obviously, he has the rapport with Coach Smith. When Coach Smith was the running back coach, that was when he had some of his best years. He's a former MAC Freshman of the Year, so he still, I think, has potential to hit going into next season. He transferred to Minnesota, like you said, last year. Didn't see much playing time there as a Gopher, and again, came back. That was an exciting announcement. He was the first guy that committed to Ohio in the portal, in the winter portal at least. So that seemed like it was a pretty set deal between him and some of the coaches here for a while. And so people are definitely excited about that. Coach Smith talked in the preseason that there was no animosity from really anyone that had stayed on those teams that he was on and is now here again. People seem like, they're ready to welcome him back, excited to welcome him back. And I believe that he will be the lead back. He brings a lot of speed, and he's just an overall solid back, a guy that's going to put up big numbers. If he can reach Anthony Tyus' numbers, we will see. That'll be a tough task to hit because, again, Tyus was the best running back in the MAC is for my money last year, and just one of the best overall in the G5 scene. So, yeah, but people are totally excited to see CA back. And then as far as the rest of the room, Duncan Brune looks to be the backup. He's pretty solidified there in the 2 spot. He's a guy. He's from Germany, a foreign guy. He's very fast. His mother ran track. She was an Olympian for the German track team. He just has an athletic background. He's a total speed guy. And he got in a little bit in his freshman year last year. He scored a touchdown against Central Michigan, which was the first of his career. But besides that, didn't see many snaps as it was Ricky Hunt, who was the backup to Anthony Tyus. But now, like you said, Hunt in the portal, he went back to Tulsa, which is where he's from. But again, back in the portal now. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. I don't really expect to see him come back in a way that CA did. I think right now the room is pretty solidified. Again, with Duncan as the number 2, he looked like he built up a little bit of muscle in the spring. He looks just like a bigger guy, bigger back. I'm really excited to see what he'll be able to do in the number 2 role because he has all the potential that I don't think really has been hit yet. Obviously, he's just a sophomore. He's a young guy. So really looking forward to that. And then as far as behind him, there's 2 pretty highly touted recruits, freshmen that came in this spring. Mike Taylor, who is a local guy. He's from Pickerington, which is just up the road, South Columbus. And he was, before CA came back, he really looked like he was going to be the guy that would almost have to take starting carries along with Duncan. But obviously now that CA is back, he's been more put into the role of the 3rd stringer. Brian Smith, after the spring game, he said that Mike Taylor and as well as Irving Brown, who's the other freshman recruit, he said they're still totally freshmen, still freshman mistakes. It seemed to me that he doesn't really expect them to make a big impact right away as freshmen this year. I think he still really wants to give those guys time to develop, time to sort of work out the kinks. I expect them not to see too much playing time, but both of them looked like they were battling for 3rd string carries. during the spring, and we'll see what the depth chart ends up saying when it comes to play Rutgers in August. So that's really what the room's looking like. Again, it's CA number 1, and then Duncan is going to be that 1-2 punch.
Before I make it, into more questions about the whole room, I've got to ask, as people who are going to be listening to the Worker Bee series and people who are trying to learn more about the teams, I saw a picture floating around where Sia was on one crutch during the spring game. Do you feel like there's any health concerns heading into the 2025 season?
No, I wouldn't say so. I heard that it was just a bit of a slight ankle tweak injury. It wasn't anything major. He started the spring as the number 1 guy. He looked great, fully healthy. He must have picked that up somewhere along the spring practice cycle. But no, I don't expect any serious injuries at all. He should totally be ready to go, probably by fall camp starting. And then obviously as well, week 1. So anyone that's kind of concerned about that, I don't think they should be. He's going to be a really good back for OU next year, and I'm excited to see him play.
That's great to hear. Now, in terms of the workload, and you talked about, who's the 1 and 2. What do we expect to see in that terms of work list? Because Tyus pretty much did it all, but then in 2023, you had Sia with about 37% of the carries, and Allison had about 29% of the carries. What are you seeing or hearing about how things will get divvied up?
I think it's going to be primarily CA in that number 1 role, in a role like Anthony Tyus was last year, getting the large majority of carries. Ricky Hunt last year was the backup. He didn't receive too many, except when Tyus was injured. And he had some good games when he was injured. Like, for example, the Buffalo game, if you go back and look at that, Ricky Hunt had a great game. But like I said, I think CA will be the primary ball handler, ball carrier. He's going to get the majority of the number 1 reps. I think Duncan will just be a slight change of pace guy. I'd be interested to see if they keep with CA on the goal line or switch with Duncan. I think that is something that could sort of be worked out during the year. We'll see how it goes along because so to not many people's knowledge, but last year, week 1 against Syracuse, the first snap of the game was taken by Ricky Hunt. He started the game as the starting running back before Anthony Tyus broke out. He had 200 yards in that game. Really, really just put himself on the map as far as just running backs in college football and had a great game. So we'll see if there's an opportunity like that for Duncan this year to kind of take that over, but I don't really see it happening unless something like that were to happen. I think the staff has a lot of faith in CA. They've been around him before. Parker's been around him. They've been in the same backfield. So, again, I really think it's going to be a heavy workload for CA going forward. But, again, Duncan's a talented guy, so he will totally have a role as number 2 back. So it'll be a good 1-2 punch coming out next year.
Let's move over to the wide receiver room. First team All-MAC wide receiver Coleman Owen has graduated. That means 113 targets, 1,246 yards, and 8 touchdowns are up for grabs in 2025. The leading receiver in this room set to return is Chase Hendricks, who had 40 receptions for 470 yards a year ago. How did the wide receiver group look in the spring?
It looked like Chase was definitely the lead guy. I would say that for sure. Coleman was a super talented dude who really came in and took a lot of people by surprise coming out of Northern Arizona. So in that slot receivers position, especially that Sam Wigla has had such success in 2023, I believe that that's the position where the majority of the production is going to come from. And from what I've heard, it sounds like Coach Izzy and some of the other guys, they're working in Chase to become that slot guy. I would expect him to have a huge year. He's super talented. He's one of the highest recruits that OU has ever really had, not even only at the wide receiver position, but just overall. So I expect him to definitely be the lead guy. Obviously, last year he was the number 2 behind Coleman, and he got a decent amount of production in the MAC championship game. The first 2 or 3 series, Chase Hendricks caught about every ball that Parker threw to him. So there's definitely rapport there, and I think that'll totally lead into next year. Behind him is Rodney Harris is the other returning starter. He was the 3rd guy when they would go with 3 receivers. He's another talented guy. He's a bigger receiver. He profiles more as an X guy on the outside, someone to throw jump balls to. He caught a couple of those. He had one really big one against Eastern Michigan last year. So I expect him to again have sort of that same sort of role as the X receiver next year, where Chase is in the slot, and then backing them up. It'll be interesting to see who the number 3 is next year. Caleb Gossett is a guy that sort of I think people are kind of slotting him in there for next year. He came in place of Coleman Owen in the Toledo game last year and had a huge game. I think he had around 6 catches, 90 yards, coming in for an injured Coleman Owen. So it's clear that he also has some of those reps. He was the number 4 guy when you look at the stats last year. So he slots in to be that 3rd guy next year for Parker. But behind them, the room in general looks pretty good. We brought in a couple transfers. Obviously, Alfred Jordan came in. He had a touchdown in the spring game. He's a super experienced guy. He's been in college football for a long time. He came in from, like Coleman did in FCS school, he came from Idaho State. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to carve himself out a role in this offense. Another guy that came in through the transfer portal was Colton Grover, who was he's from the South Dakota School of Mines, which is probably the smallest school that's a guy's come in on. But he went to the same high school as Parker Navarro, funny enough. They both went to the same high school, and I believe it's the Tempe area of Arizona. I don't think they spent any time together there, but they are from the same school, which is just a funny story. But again, it'll be interesting to see if he can sort of work something out in the offense. And then behind them, Max Radarty got some snaps last year when the number 2s would come in. He caught a touchdown late in the game against Ball State. He's shown that he has talent. It'll be interesting to see if he can almost take that 3rd spot from Caleb Gossett. But as far as them, I think that's pretty much the big 3 of Hendricks, Harris, and Gossett. We will see, though. The last guy that I have yet to mention is Eamon Dennis, who I think might be the fastest guy on the team. He got in a lot last year as a guy on some packages where they would motion him the ball. He would get it and make something happen with his feet. They looked for him deep a lot last year. He seems sort of more of a gadget guy to me, but he's a national champion. Yeah, he transferred from Michigan to last year. He won a ring there and won a MAC championship ring this past year. So and he'll also be the team's kick returner as well. Most definitely. He took one back to the house against Kent State last year. So he has experience there. He has trust there from the coaches. So I expect him to really make his mark on the special teams, but he's still definitely a gadget guy to watch out for next year.
So with the OC becoming the head coach, the quarterback's coach going back to be the OC, what have you seen in terms of how the tight ends will be utilized in this offense?
It'll be interesting. The tight ends weren't very totally utilized last year. Mason Williams is definitely the number 1 guy. He has a lot of talent, I think. He was named the freshman All-American last season. He's a local guy from Mogador in Ohio, but he didn't get a ton of looks last year. He did catch 2 touchdowns late in the year and back-to-back games with the last regular season game against Ball State. And then he had a pretty impressive touchdown catch against Miami in Ford Field during the MAC championship game. He's a big guy. He's a good blocker. And again, he's shown that he can make some stuff happen when he gets the ball in his hands. But as far as next year is looking, I don't know if he will be totally utilized as much as some other tight ends might have been or might be. The offense is still super run heavy. Parker didn't throw the ball that much. When he did, it was pretty successful. But the tight ends last year didn't really see that many targets. Backing him up is Jake Bruno, who will be coming back. Again, he's just a typical number 2 tight end, good blocker, which they need to be in an offense like this, where there's so many run plays called and such success with the run game. The tight ends really need to be good blockers. So both of them are that, and I think it'll be those 2 that you see primarily on the field next year. Specifically Mason Williams, who will be returning for, I think, his 3rd year here at OU. So, but again, he has a lot of talent, and we'll see what his role is like next year. I just don't expect it to be anything massive. So we'll see.
Well, moving over to the offensive line, they take a hit in 2025 with their right guard, center, and left guard graduating. The right tackle is off to Wake Forest. That leaves left tackle Davion Witherspoon as the main man left to anchor this line. On the bright side, they do have a fair amount of guys who saw game action a year ago return. They bring in a couple of transfers via the portal as well. Is it safe to assume that the coaching staff's kind of happy with what they have based on only bringing in 2 guys?
I would say so. We have a new O-line coach this year, Coach Tavita Thompson. He came in from Central. He's a MAC guy who was served at the exact same position last year at Central Michigan. He comes over from them. He has a lot of experience with Coach Smith. I believe Coach Smith coached him when Coach Thompson was a player himself at Oregon State. He's a Hawaiian native as well. So they have a lot of ties going back to that. But I would assume that they're pretty happy. They brought in, like you said, Marciano from Dartmouth, and then Josh Waite from Shippensburg, a smaller school. Witherspoon is a stud. He's very good. He bounced around from left guard and left tackle. Him and Carson Heidecker kind of switched spots throughout the year last year, and they both were pretty great at both those positions. And, Witherspoon will definitely be the leader on that line next year. I wouldn't be shocked to see him be named the captain looking ahead to next year. He seems like a vocal guy, especially coming now, where last year he was one of 2 guys who had eligibility coming back. That was a senior-led O-line with Parker Titsworth, Christoph Atkinson, and who else? Carson Heidecker as well. But yeah, like I said, Witherspoon will be coming back. He's a great guy to have back. As far as the rest of the line goes, it'll be some interesting positions. It seems like Cam Wright has the center spot locked up. I haven't seen anyone else take starting snaps under center this spring. He was the guy in the spring game as well. As far as other guys on the line, Tagana Cisse, who was a transfer last year from Idaho, he didn't play that much. He won a couple awards while he was at Idaho at the FCS level. Last year, moving up to the FBS level, he didn't see much playing time, but I expect him to definitely have a role. That was a guy that Coach Smith mentioned after the spring game as a guy who impressed him not only during the game, but throughout the spring as well. He said that he attacked the spring well, and it just seems like he'll definitely have a role coming into next year. As far as the 2 other guys, Trent Allen and Jordan Jones seem like they're the 2 guys. Trent Allen got some snaps last year coming in, and just in case of injury or in other packages. He definitely is going to have a starting role. And then as far as the other guy, Jordan Jones was sort of in the same role as Trent Allen, as a guy that got some spot snaps last year. You know, they came into almost every game, I would say, when they needed him. So the line is probably going to look like Cam Wright at center, Tagana Cisse at one of the guards. Witherspoon will definitely be the left tackle. Like you said, he'll be the anchor of that. And then Trent Allen and Jordan Jones are going to be the other 2 guys on that O-line next year, from what I can tell at least. We'll see how the fall shakes out and if they bring in any other transfers. But, that's what I would expect at least.
All right, Charlie, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
I've mentioned him already a lot during this podcast, this recording, but it's Chase Hendricks. The slot position in this OU offense is a position that has seen so much success. It got 2 guys to the NFL, and Sam Wiglusz, who was picked up by the Rams when he came out of the draft, and then Coleman Owen, who was just recently picked up by the Colts this last draft cycle. So I think it's going to be Chase coming into that role next year. I still expect that role to be Parker's number 1 target. He also has the most returning production coming out from last year. It wasn't much. It wasn't a ton, with just 440 yards and then I believe it was like 40-some catches. But regardless, I still think that he will definitely be the breakout guy. He's my pick, at least, for a guy that hasn't totally broken out yet. Obviously, he started last year, but I expect him to have a big year this year. So I'm looking forward to that.
All right, well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. While we have a new head coach and a new OC, the defensive coordinator remains the same. Can you describe the defensive scheme that Coach John Hauser runs at Ohio?
Yeah, it's pretty heavily DB based. Bringing back Coach Hauser was one of the biggest wins of the offseason. That was another concern after Spence left the previous offseason, but Coach Hauser came in and just really, really imposed, his defense to a big degree last year. They were very successful. it's got four men down on the D line, just your traditional 2 defensive tackles and 2 edge. There's only 2 linebackers, really, 2 traditional linebackers. Those guys were Blake Leak and Shea Taylor last year. Both of those guys have left. And so that leaves like 5 defensive backs. A lot of the time, too, play with 3 safeties on the field, guys who are super versatile like Adonis Williams. It's a big, heavy nickel package that he likes to run and use in a lot of different ways. His blitzes were really successful last year, and when they need to go cover, they can go do that as well. In the MAC championship game, it was really the blitzes specifically, though, that kind of heated up Brett Gabbert and held that Miami offense to just 3 points. So OU fans should definitely be excited for Coach Hauser coming back. He got promoted to the associate head coach as well, which helped him stay. And the defense should continue to be really, really stout, even with some of the guys that left this offseason.
Well, let's dig into that position room that Coach Hauser will be coaching. And let's start with the guys up front along the defensive line. By way of graduation or the portal, this group sees 6 of their top 7 linemen in terms of snap played in 2024 depart from this room, one of which was first-team All-MAC Bradley Weaver, who had 10 sacks in 2024. Looking ahead to the 2025 team, the D-line is highlighted by the return of Braylon Henderson. After him, this room really kind of lacks playing experience. How did that unit look this spring and come together?
I would definitely say that I don't think it looks complete yet at all. I don't think it looks solidified. A lot of guys were rotating in and out during the spring game, big waves of different guys. But like you said, they lost a lot of guys this offseason. They lost the 2 returning defensive tackles and Cam Rice and Braylon Henderson. Just recently in the spring portal. Bradley Weaver, lost him to Rutgers. He was a guy that seemed like he was going to go. He entered the portal a year before as well, but decided to stay. But he's now gone to Rutgers. And there just is not a lot of experience. They brought in a decent amount of transfers. One guy that's returning that got some time was Casey Seegers, who's the defensive end. He, I believe, had the most snaps on the field last year that will be coming back. He projects to be sort of a starter for next year. But beyond him, it's kind of tough to tell who the coaches are really going to trust in that position. Guys like Tremaine Scott and Jeff Phelps, who's the new pass rush coordinator. So we'll see what they end up going with going into next year. But there's just going to be a lot of guys that will rotate in and out during fall as well to see. It'll be interesting. The transfers that came in looks pretty good. Evan Herman was a guy that came in from Vanderbilt, obviously a big school. We'll see what he can do. One guy that did impress was Anis Luckman, who was a transfer from Arkansas Pine Bluff. He actually went to high school with Rodney Harris, which is just a random tidbit. But he made some plays during the spring game. It looks like he might have that starting role sort of in pencil. Again, I wouldn't put anything in pen right now as far as the defensive lineman goes. So we'll see just how that plays out in the fall. And then obviously looking ahead to the depth chart for week 1 next year.
With All-MAC first-teamer Bradley Weaver off to Rutgers, who do you feel has the ability to take that next step in this room?
It's definitely going to be Seegers, I would say. He to me looked like he had the most juice rushing from the position that he did last year. He was an edge just like Bradley Weaver was. I expect him to fill his role. We'll see if he is able to do it. But like I said, he's a guy that got a lot of snaps last year. He put up some numbers, and you could tell the talent was there when he was on the field. We'll see how he progresses in the next season. But as of right now in the defensive lineman room, he's definitely, he's really one of the only returners that got a lot of snaps. So I would expect it to be him for sure.
Well, like the defensive line, the linebacking unit also is going to look different here in 2025. Blake Leak graduates, and then we have a trio that looks like all 3 of them, I guess, are off to Charlotte now.
Yeah.
And Shea Taylor, Caden Schmitz, and Stellan Bowman. Those 4 guys accounted for 144 tackles in 2024. How did the linebacker group look in the spring?
Much like the D-line room, I don't know if it was really totally complete. Nothing's really set. Like you said, we also lost another guy in Parker Starts, who was a freshman last year, along with Stellan Bowman, who also went to Charlotte. So that's 4 linebackers that went to Charlotte. They followed Coach Fanes, who was the linebacker coach of OU last year. He'll be the defensive coordinator and linebacker coach for Charlotte this upcoming season. And he's another guy that you can tell that the guys love him. Shea Taylor had offers from West Virginia and Penn State, and he still decided to go to Charlotte along with Kane Schmitz and all the other guys to join Coach Fanes. So that leaves, like you said, a pretty thin linebacker room going into next year. Guys that were getting the reps, the starting reps during the spring game were Jack Fries and Michael Molnar. Neither of those guys have seen much time really starting on the field as a Bobcat. Molnar did a little bit last year before he got hurt. He seemed to be a guy that would come in rotation in relief of guys like you said, Blake Leak, Shea Taylor, and Kane Schmitz. So he has the most experience that's going to be coming back. Jack Fries really doesn't have much experience. We'll see how he turns out. And then another guy that's kind of under the radar is Charlie Christopher, who will be a true freshman this upcoming year. He came out of Lake High School, and when Coach Smith was asked about guys that have been making some impressions, he said that Charlie Christopher had a great spring. There are videos of him lifting crazy weight in the weight room. So we'll see if he gets a big role under this new linebacker coach, Chris Woods, who has had coaching experience all over the place, from semi-pro football to Oklahoma to Temple. He's been around a lot of stops. So he'll be manning the linebacker room this year. But as of right now, it looks like it's going to be Molnar and Fries, that will be the starting two guys there.
Is there any concerns with depth? Do you think they'll be looking to add more guys, I guess, maybe through this next, the portal over the summer? Or?
I would definitely say it's possible. Like I said, there's really those three guys that I've seen make some big plays during the spring. A guy like Brady Sicily, though, might be able to come and fill a role for them. But like I said, none of these guys that I've mentioned really have much experience at all. The room is still a big question mark, I think, for OU going into the season. And I assume that they're just going to be able to let those guys sort of develop over the fall and kind of come into their own as linebackers here. The transfer portal is pretty much closed as far as I know. So we'll see. I'm not sure if they'll be able to get any more guys, but I would expect, again, like Molnar, Fries, and Christopher to be the big three going into next year. We'll see how it all plays out, though.
The defensive backfield graduated Dustin Johnson and Roman Parody while losing Austin Brawley to New Mexico. This backfield is highlighted by the return of DJ Walker, Tank Pearson, and Adonis Williams Jr. On paper, this kind of looks to be the strength of the defense heading into 2025. But what should we expect from this defensive backfield in 2025?
Like you said, it is the strength on paper, and I believe it'll be the strength in the field as well. There's the most leadership there. A guy like Adonis Williams is such a stud, and he was named a captain last year as a junior, and I believe he'll be a captain again this year as he returns. But those guys, the way that Coach Hauser can sort of deploy all those bodies really makes them dangerous. Like you said, DJ Walker coming back is huge. He's a guy that was second team All-MAC last year as a redshirt freshman in his real first year playing. He really wowed me, at least, on the field during his snaps. He's a guy that was all over the place. He forced fumbles. He deflected passes, came down and made big hits. So he really will be, I think, one of the premier guys in the defense next year, along with, like I said, Adonis Williams, who played more in the box. He's a bigger guy, a bigger safety, and he'll sort of be that roaming linebacker hybrid-ish kind of guy for Hauser's defense next year. And then besides him, Tank Pearson coming back is big. He's a bit of a ball hawk. He had 4 picks last year. He's a shorter guy, but you can't tell on tape. You can't tell during the games. He plays bigger. He makes big tackles as well. He's a guy that has a lot of experience here in this program, and he's a big guy to have returning for next year. And then a guy in the corner room that I like next year is going to be Michael Mack. He was a guy, he started his career at Air Force before transferring to Wisconsin, a Big Ten school, obviously. He didn't play a single snap at Wisconsin. His eligibility was revoked for that year due to some NCAA transfer rules. They ruled that his transfer took place outside of the necessary dates or something like that. It was a kind of a murky situation for him in Madison as a Badger. But last year he transferred here. He came in and made some plays. He was definitely sort of the spot corner along with Roman Perotti, who was, I would say, our number one guy last year, who just got picked up by the Buccaneers, I believe, out of the draft. So, yeah, I expect those two guys to be the premier corners next year. And then we brought in a slew of transfers, and Ricky Hyatt, Jamar Mundy, and Pierre Kamani. It'll be interesting to see what role those guys will get. They're all really older guys, veteran guys. Pierre Kamani is actually a guy that has been with the program before, a lot like CA. He was here in 2019, so even pre-COVID. So he's had a lot of experience, and again, experience here as a Bobcat. So we'll be able to see how he, Mundy, and Ricky Hyatt are able to sort of carve out a role for themselves going into next year. As far as the youth goes, Tony Mathis was a guy that was highly recruited out of high school. He was a freshman last year and got some snaps. He's definitely very talented. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he plays a big role going into next year, sort of like almost DJ Walker did last year, where he's sort of a younger guy that sort of burst onto the scene and makes big impact right away in his first year really playing college ball. So it's definitely going to be Adonis and DJ as the leaders and sort of the stalwarts of that secondary and the safety position for next year. I expect them to have really big years.
So like you mentioned, DJ and Adonis kind of being the leaders in this room. Who do you think has that ability to take the next step and make this already strong secondary even stronger here in 2025?
I think this guy I was just talking about, Tony Mathis. We'll see if he is able to get that role that DJ was able to get last year. He's a guy that has a ton of talent. He made plays on kickoff return, and just on the defense in general last year. When he was on the field, he showed up. And so I believe that he is the guy that really has a chance to play either safety or corner. It'll be interesting to see where Hauser puts him next year to give him a chance to succeed. But as far as a younger guy that I think that can break out into the secondary, it's going to be him, most definitely. So it'll be interesting to see what he does going into next year and what his role is going to look like.
If you have to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who would that be?
I would say Michael Molnar. I think that he can profile sort of like a Blake Leak did, where he was a tackle machine and really was active in the middle of the field. Molnar got some snaps last year before he was hurt. He looks pretty good. He's a guy that's been here for a decent amount of time. I know he is right now. I think he's a redshirt junior, so he spent some time here for sure. He's a big dude. You can tell it when you watch him during the spring. He's athletic. I think that he has a chance to step up into the starting linebacker role and really make a name for himself next year, just like I said, like Leak did, where he was a stud last year, racking up tackles. He got a couple picks. So Molnar would be my pick for that for sure.
Special teams room looks kind of young. Do you have any concerns heading into the season?
Slightly, a little bit. We'll see. Last year, Gianni Spedic was our kicker, or was OU's kicker. He was fantastic last year. He ended up transferring to Memphis, which leaves that kicker spot open. We got a transfer in though from UCLA, and a guy, David Dellenbach, who has a lot of talent. He was a highly recruited kicker out of high school. Obviously, spent his first year last year in LA at UCLA. He, I would assume, would become the starting kicker for next year. That'll be interesting. We didn't get to see much of the kicking and what those guys look like during the spring, so that's still sort of a mystery. And then as far as punting goes, that's another big mystery. It looks like it could be a guy like Dominic Konopka, or a guy like Alex Casey, who takes that role going into next year as the punter. Last year was Jack Wilson, who was a fifth-year senior from Australia. He just provided consistency at that position. And with him graduating, it's definitely going to be a search to find the next punter for OU next year. So I'll be interested to see who that is, as well as the kicker. Dellenbach profiles to be that guy, as he was super highly touted. Obviously, started at a big school like UCLA, but you never know. Last year we had guys that came in from big schools, Power 5 schools, at the receiver room, and then Coleman Ellen ends up being the best receiver in the MAC. So you never know in college football, and I'll be interested to see how that special teams unit works out for sure.
Now that spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into 2025, and how do you think the team can go about addressing those concerns?
Right now, I think that it's the defensive line. Last year, that group, I would say, was arguably our best group on the team. There was just so many guys that were able to come in. They had at least 3 defensive ends that were starting quality and at least 3 defensive tackles that were starting quality. And so with a lot of the exodus of those guys, all 3 tackles hit the portal. Weaver hit the portal. Marcel Walker-Burgess ended up graduating along with Ben McNaboe. Those guys were veterans. They were experienced. And they played huge roles in the defense last year. And with like I said, the exodus of those guys, the room looks empty. And again, those positions will be filled probably by transfers with the guys like Honest Luckman and a guy like Nehemiah Dukes, who came out of Youngstown State. But right now it looks thin, and we'll be able to see what it looks like. Austin Mitchell is a defensive tackle who got a little bit of reps last year. I would assume that he starts the year. And like I said, Casey Seegers, who I think will probably end up being the leader and the biggest guy to come out of that room next year. But overall, that would definitely have to be my area of concern for OU, which is a team that, despite a lot of the transfers, still has a lot of returning leadership. But on that front line, it looks shaky as far as right now. So we'll see how it turns out.
Well, in today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, the transfer portal, how has this changed Ohio's recruiting philosophy? Do you see them spending more time recruiting D2, JUCO, D1 transfers, or still hitting the road and getting those high school recruits?
I think a lot of the guys that they get really come from smaller schools. Guys last year that played big roles, Coleman Owen, obviously, again, FCS guy from Northern Arizona, who came in. After the year, he tweeted that OU was his only FBS offer. And he showed out and was one of the best receivers in the group of 5. Last year, a guy like Ben McNaboe, who came in from I believe, North Dakota. He started last year. He was a great edge rusher for OU. It's a lot of guys like that. Takana Cisse from Idaho. Even this year, Alfred Jordan came in from Idaho State. Nehemiah Dukes came from Youngstown State. Anis Luckman came from Arkansas Pine Bluff. A lot of these smaller FCS schools. So at least last year, the staff really needed to be able to fill production because of so many transfers leaving, and they were able to find those hidden gems and diamonds in the rough from smaller schools. But I still believe that they are totally recruiting high school as well. Like I talked about, Hype Grand is a big quarterback recruit coming in. And even for the 2026 class, they got Levi Davis from Olentangy Orange, a Columbus school around here, to commit here. And like I said, the running backs coming in, two big freshmen coming in there. So the high school pipeline is still definitely alive. It's not shut down like some of these schools, bigger schools have with the transfer portal. But it's definitely, I would say that the bulk of production is coming from the transfer portal and guys that are coming from smaller schools, guys that weren't highlighted as well as they maybe should have been in their previous stops. So that to me seems like the big philosophy, at least, turning those smaller guys into these big names that can contribute and win for a really solid program like Ohio.
How do you feel the staff at Ohio is doing navigating the portal?
This year, time will tell, obviously, but I think it's been pretty good. They've, like I said, the defensive line is sort of the weakest position, but they brought in a couple guys, a couple eds to come in and hopefully fill roles there. On the offensive line, they brought in 2 guys to replace a bunch of seniors leaving there as well. I think that they are sort of targeting positions of need in the portal, and they're not really going after a guy like they didn't bring in any quarterbacks this offseason. As far as receivers go, they only brought in 1. And I believe that they're adding depth in places where they could use it, like places in the secondary. They brought in 3 really veteran guys that will be able to come in and shape out some kind of role in the John Hauser defense, where there's so many defensive backs utilized and so many guys on the field. So I believe that they've been doing it well. This new staff, obviously, it's Brian Smith's first year with his staff running the show at OU. But as far as last year and Tim Albin, I mean, the transfer portal was really the reason that I think they won the MAC title. With, again, so many guys coming in, filling huge roles after so many guys left in that offseason as well. So they've definitely been using the transfer portal as a big benefit to themselves. It can hurt, but it can also help. And that was showed a lot last year with the guys that were able to come in.
So, Charlie, earlier Justice asked you, what is the most concerning part? Which position or position group is the most concerning part? Well, I want to know, what's the main strength of this team heading into 2025?
I think it has to be quarterback with Parker Navarro. I really think that has to be it with his connection with Coach Smith. That is the most important position in football for a reason. If you don't have a quarterback, then you can't do much. And we have a quarterback like Parker that is so well versed in running and throwing. It adds such a dynamic feel to the offense. And I think that'll be really important next year. Like I said, he'll probably get votes to be MAC Player of the Year in the preseason. And by season's end, I wouldn't be shocked if that's what ends up happening as well.
In just how important Navarro's going to be, he used his legs a lot last year, and I know we didn't talk about it in the quarterback section, but do you feel like based off of, the guys that they have coming into that running back room that they rely more on the running backs running the ball as opposed to Parker scrambling and taking those and kind of keeping him as much in bubble wrap as possible, or how do you think they utilize him in the running game?
We'll see. I don't think that he's going to be in bubble wrap per se. Last year, he took a lot of hits. He's not a guy that really wants to slide. He makes guys miss. He'll spin. He'll juke. He'll do pretty much whatever to get extra yards, and it shows up on the film. But Parker, again, I think he'll have almost an equal role to some of the running backs. He went over 1,000 yards on the ground last year. He had almost 20 touchdowns on the ground last year. He put up some monster numbers from a rushing perspective as a quarterback, and I don't really expect that to change. I think, again, the offense will remain mostly the same with just a new running back and C.A. Bangura coming in, who I believe will do great things as well. And yeah, I just think that he is definitely the most important part for the team next year. And I think he's just the biggest strength overall looking ahead for next year. When you have a returning guy that is proven that can put up, big numbers and lead a team, he is a real leader on that team. Tim Albin had a quote last year that was like, I believe it went something like, a team embodies the personality of their quarterback, and our quarterback is super tough. And that's evident. So I believe that same culture and that same toughness will continue next year with Parker under center. So I'm excited to watch it.
And if people aren't aware of how much he ran, we said Anthony Tyus kind of did it all. He had 1,194 yards rushing to Parker Navarro's 1,106 yards rushing.
Yeah.
Anthony Tyus had 9 touchdowns to Parker Navarro's 18, and Anthony Tyus had 91.9 yards per game, while Parker Navarro had 85 yards per game.
Yeah, it's pretty much identical roles. I mean, Parker is the definition of a dual threat guy. And yeah, that'll continue in the next year, I'm sure.
Well, coming off of a year where, there's so much success, a MAC championship, a big bowl win over another group of 5 champion, what does success look like for the Bobcats here in 2025?
We'll see. I think that we've had now 3 straight 10-win years, which is tough to, keep that going. But I think that a winning record in the MAC, and I think making it back to the MAC championship game is going to be what success looks like. I mean, last year I had my doubts about the team, and they ended up winning the whole thing. So, it'll be – you never know how it plays out. But I would say that success looks like 9 to 10 wins for a team and a culture that has had such success, like you said, recently. And I think that that's what they're going to strive for. I think winning another bowl game is definitely on that list as well. OU has one of the longest bowl winning streaks, I believe. They've won a lot, and they've been in a lot. recently in the last decade or so. So that to me is really what is going to define a successful year. Obviously, I'm sure everyone on that team wants another MAC championship, and rightfully so. I mean, they were able to get it, and that's really the national championship for the group of 5 schools, is winning their conference in a bowl game. So if they're able to do that, that's definitely going to be success. But for me, I would say 9 to 10 with a MAC appearance and a bowl win. So we'll see what that looks like next year.
Well, Charlie, is there anything else that you want to share or think that we should know about this 2025 Ohio Bobcats football team?
I don't know. I'll make a prediction though. The non-con for next year is pretty tough. We start with Rutgers, then we host West Virginia and Peden, and then OU is going to go to Columbus to play Ohio State. I will just predict that we win one of those. That OU wins one of those games. I don't know which one it's going to be, but 2 years ago we were able to beat Iowa State here. That was a big Power 5 upset. We've beaten schools like Pitt and Penn State in the past. There's history with us beating Power 5 programs, or with OU being Power 5 programs, and I think that it's going to continue next year. I'm not sure which one, but I would be willing to bet that's one of them. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be there and watch them. So yeah.
Well, Charlie, thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Dude, thank you guys so much. This was awesome. Super fun. Just awesome to come on here and talk about OU. I'm excited for next year for sure. Be on the lookout for OU again in the MAC.
All right, if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. Until next time, we are the G5 Hive.
Stand up and cheer, Ohio, to get red, to get right above the rest. Our team is